Hello, coaches. Coach KW here. Hope you're all well. Winter is coming along nicely here in New England. And one of the things I want to talk about today is using stats for your team, collecting stats for your team, and more perhaps interestingly, using AI LLMs to maybe analyze those stats. I know there's some controversy about collecting stats for youth soccer because, again, really, in many, many ways, there's no reason to do it. Like, we're not trying to rank our players on our teams by goals and things like that. Although, as they get older, having some sort of metrics where they can feel they can compete can be a method by which you induce motivation. These players want to get better, and one of the ways they may do it is to judge their stats. It also can cause problems. So the stats I'm going to show you today, I do not share with my players in any way, shape, or form, except for the game stats. But what stats can be useful for youth soccer coaches and clubs and teams and towns is that it can show you some trends. And so I'm going to share with you the spreadsheet of how I capture the stats, how I do it. I'm going to then look at some of the things that we pull out of it that I find useful, and you might as well. And then we'll also feed them into the AI animal and see what comes out with it and see if it also comes with the same sort of information. So let's get in and take a look at what I capture, how I capture it, and why I capture it, and then we'll have some fun with the magic of AI. All right, let's go. So here we are. I use a Google Sheet to capture these things just because you could use any spreadsheet, obviously. And I will see if I can find a way to provide a link to share this template if you kind of want it. So this first page we're looking at is kind of a summary page. It does math. And so it's collecting information from all the tabs that are down at the bottom if you take a look down there. So it's showing my boys 5-1 team, my fifth grade team, playing 9v9 this fall, showing their stats. Obviously, they had a fairly dominant season with 9 wins and no losses or draws. Some of that can be attributed to our league perhaps putting us in the wrong division, and some of it can be attributed to the fact that our this team's been together for 3 years, and they do a really good job playing together, and they're really talented boys. They work hard. Give them credit where credit is due. But this is kind of a summary stat, and this is kind of fun to look at, but it's not that meaningful. I mean, having a 45-6 goal differential, that really doesn't do anything for me or anybody else for that matter. It's the individual stuff. But it is interesting to look at some trends. You can see how many shots against we give up versus we take on target and off target, which is a good indicator of us playing well and in the final third, at least putting pressure on. Quarters, goal kicks, a lot more goal kicks for the other team because we missed the net or it goes out of bounds. Offsides, pretty even, which is interesting. I think, again, because we possess the ball a lot of times. Throw-ins are absolutely equal, which is kind of a bizarre stat to keep. I keep it anyways. I don't really know what to think of it, but we'll see what AI thinks about it later on, okay? Fouls that we give away, those are anything with a penalty kick. Not a penalty kick, any sort of kick, indirect or free. We give those too, and then we had a couple of PKs go both ways. So how do I capture this? Well, as you know, I record most of my games. I recorded all but one of them this year. And when I record the games, I watch them back. And honestly, I really don't do much more than make a simple tally sheet on a piece of paper. I'll hold it up here. A simple tally sheet, and I literally just tick off what happens and what doesn't happen in the game. It's nothing sophisticated. I don't have anybody on the sidelines doing this. It's not real time. It's really dependent. Could you do it on the sideline? Sure, you could. You could ask a parent. You could ask the kids on the bench to keep a simplified version of this if they have a hard time focusing. You can give them a whiteboard or some other sheet and let them mark off things. But I do it watching the video after the fact. And I record it all here. So let's take a look. Again, I'm not all that interested in too many of these things, but the shot percentage is one that I found useful, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll throw my video links in. And you'll also notice 2 of the games are in gray. For whatever reason, our league dropped us in Division 4, even though we asked for Division 3 this year. And then they realized their mistake 2 games in when we basically complained to league that for the entire second half of both of these games, I had to play keep away, so I didn't go over the maximum goals differential. It's 7 in our league, but I really didn't want to get there if I could help it because it was such a mismatch. So that first game and the second one, I didn't even bother recording, obviously. We were in Division 4, and then we moved up to Division 3, where it was a little bit more competitive. So it kind of gives me, sort of a big picture. And as the year goes along, when the spring season comes in, whether they move us in division or not, it will be useful for me, I feel like, to have these stats to see how we've progressed through the entire year against our opponents. Obviously, as a coach, you're assessing how your team is doing just from the fact that you have practices and games and you know how they're going. What I'll tell you is one of the things that this lets me do is it lets me verify biases that happen during the game. You get a feeling as a coach when you're watching a game, but your emotions are involved while doing that. And you say to yourself, I feel like X. I feel like we're doing this all the time. I feel like we're doing that all the time. One of my assistant coaches was worried that one of my players was only passing to his club teammates and he was getting frustrated with them. But then his emotions took over and that's all he saw. So afterwards, I went back on the video and I literally did a tally count, wrote down all the kids, and then ticked off whenever this player passed to another player. And of course, they weren't just playing to their club teammates or even their friends. Like they were passing the ball all over the place. And the data disproved that sentiment that, again, emotions can sometimes color your assessment of what happens in the game. So being able to watch it back after the fact and then have some stats can help. And one of the things I felt like, especially after the fourth game in column E, is that we were just taking shots from silly areas of the field. We were 25 yards out, looping in shots, and the keepers were just having catching practice. And you can see that in the shot percentage area. We had a 17.86 conversion rate for a game where we had 28 shots on net and 16 off net. I don't care what level you're coaching at. That's a mighty low scoring percentage from that many shots. So what did we do? In the next couple practices, we worked in some finishing drills because they were making bad decisions. So we stopped that piece of it of saying, hey, these are the dangerous areas. And then we worked on when we get into the good areas, this is how not to hit the keeper in the hands. And so you can see after that, our percentages went up. That G column is a little bit of an anomaly because it was the first time we were on turf. It was a weird sort of game, to say the least. The ball was bouncing all over the place. The rest of the season, as we went along, it started to get back up into 1-5, 1-3, a lot better sort of conversion rate. And that was from having that feeling and then confirming the feeling with that data. I also keep stats on all my players based on what I watched during the game. And again, I'm not necessarily looking for, output here. I mean, my own kid that's on this chart will show up as having 1 goal and 1 assist, but he plays as a 6 or a center back most of the time. His contributions to the game are someplace else. He's keeping clean sheets. He's distributing the ball. He's directing traffic with his words. We don't capture that stat here. Maybe you could come up with a stat that captures that, but I captured these stats going across. So I've hidden the names across the top, but all the way across here, basically each player, each week, I add a set of columns for that information and I drop it in there just so then it summarizes into this sheet here. Is it important? No, it's not important at all, but it is fun and interesting to have that information as a coach as you look back over the season and figure out, was I putting players in the right places to get certain things? Interestingly, like one of my top goal scorers is my keeper, one of my keepers, because, he plays half the game. So when he goes out on the field, he's only playing half of the game, and yet he's one of the top scorers on our team. What can I learn from watching him that I can then use as an example for my other players who are playing up front that can say, hey, this kid's being super successful up front, only playing half of a game in the field, and most of it as a striker. What other good habits he's doing that you can copy? Watch him during the game, watch him during practices when he's up front, and what can you take from that to be like your teammate? So that's where sometimes these stats can be really helpful, is to help highlight those things that you can then go, what is that kid doing that is either innate or we've trained, and can we give it to other players as well? So let's take a look at the quote unquote fun part here. So now what I did is I went to both Gemini, Google Gemini, and Chat-GPT, both free editions for what I'm doing. I'm not paying anything. Took this information, and it was a little bit of a struggle to figure out the right format. But I fed it in. You can see my prompt here. If you haven't used LLMs or these sort of things before, a prompt is basically you tell it what you want it to do. So I said here, please use this Google Drive document to provide analysis of the data. It contains match and individual player statistics from soccer games. So it found it, went through, and kind of gave it this summary. Looking at the record, probably fairly obvious. But again, great to have this summary. Looking at the individual ones, it really didn't dive into it on this version. So it just basically said, this is what you're doing and how you could use it. Trends and observations. This is where it gets maybe a little bit more interesting. Shots on them. So shots against our team. Our team had consistently more shots on goal than the others. Offensive dominance, we knew that. Goal kicks. Again, similar. I don't necessarily always notice. The only reason I noticed the number of goal kicks is for a number of years, I've been recording games so I could use our goal kick example, especially in 7v7, to show other coaches and make video content. And I was always frustrated that we'd have so few goal kicks that I couldn't get video of any of them. This is just another, if I wasn't videoing them, I might not have keyed into the fact that we have that many of that few of them, which also led me to change one of my practices because I realized we had a game where we did have a number of goal kicks and we weren't all that sharp at them because we don't get them in games. So we hadn't really been practicing them. So next week we spent some time going back over goal kick strategies, refining it in the 9v9 game, really working on different scenarios because 9v9, that pressure is right at the top of the box. It doesn't have to go back to a restraining line. And so we worked on things like what happens if the team presses with 1 or 2 or 3 players. And so in later games, we had a little bit more goal kicks opportunities, and we were able to then execute them more consistently with a little bit more comfort. It says we have more throw-ins of the opponents, but we looked at that summary where they were dead even. So I'm not quite sure. Again, LLMs are not perfect, so you have to take this with a grain of salt. And own goals, it says neither team or the opponent scored any own goals. We saw that the data, it was. So if anything, this is an important piece to understand that LLMs are not perfect, even with your own data. But you have to take these things with a grain of salt. You have to know your data going in to make sure that you're not getting the wrong conclusion. And then it gave me some suggestions, breaking that, like I talked about time-based data. Obviously, it knows that, it's using some model information to know that soccer matches a lot of times are time-based, or time of possession, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not all that interested in that. Maybe I should be, but that's some of the suggestions I have here. Overall successful and dominant team. So that was Gemini. So now let's take a look at what Chat-GPT did with this information. So same sort of deal. I had to figure out what sort of file format Chat-GPT wanted. This time it was a PDF, believe it or not. And it took a look, win record, goals for and against, gives us that sort of information. They're using the right terminology, achieved several clean sheets. So clearly you can see the model is using inferences from other situations out there. The shot accuracy, occasional inefficiency in converting shots to goals. And we talked about that already in the video. But again, if maybe you didn't notice that within a game situation and you weren't keeping the stats, maybe you don't get keyed into, hey, we're taking lots and lots of shots and not converting them, but we've also not worked on finishing for a while. Maybe I should change up one of my practices. And so that's what happened here. You can see offensive play, corners, defensive strength. We knew we had that. It understood that we had 2 PKs scored. So suggestions for improvement. First one, shooting efficiency. We talked about that already. But the second one is one that I've known about for a while, but I just kind of ignore. But it is true from 3rd grade straight through to the 5th grade season. And that is, we rarely score from corner kicks. Now, because you can't head the ball, corners tend to be not that much of an offensive weapon in the game until you can really start to head the ball. If you're kicking the ball in, you play short, and then as soon as you play short, because the nets are small and the areas are small, teams tend to just pack the box. So it's really hard to get a shot through when You play it on the ground. So lots of reasons why in 7v7 and 9v9, corners aren't quite the weapon that could be in 11v11. Although honestly, if you look at the 11v11 stats, even for pros, outside some of the anomalies like Arsenal this year and a few others, corner kicks are not necessarily as productive as everybody wishes or hopes they could be. But it is a correct analysis there. And it is something that if I hadn't kind of already known ahead of time, this may be useful to me to say, yeah, are we doing anything with our set pieces? Now, philosophy-wise, I don't spend a lot of time on set pieces. The kids kind of get the idea. They play in club. They watch soccer on TV, perhaps the best thing. So they get some ideas on their own, and I kind of leave it up to them to figure out what they want to try or not try. But it is true. I don't know how it came to that suggestion because there's no stat in there that says successful corners versus unsuccessful corners. So it is interesting to look at that, except that maybe it looked at the total number of corners and the total number of goals scored in each match and said, it doesn't seem like that corner number has been influential in the number of goals scored. This is what it came up with me to be. Really kind of interesting. There are other tools out there, but that's what I got out of both Gemini and Chat-GPT. So there you have it. Stats. Brilliant or bogus? Let me know in the comments. It's the first year I've really done this. I've never really done it in the years I did 7v7. I didn't have the ability to record the games as consistently as I do now, but I found it useful. I have found it valuable. It is, again, as we talked in the video, dispelled some myths based on emotions and also provided some insight when you had a feeling that perhaps something was happening, but you didn't have anything concrete. Having those numbers in front of you can be useful. And then taking those numbers and feeding them into an LLM, trying to apply AI, I just thought was interesting, trying to blend my background in IT with what I do in soccer, resulted in some interesting results and confirmed some things I kind of knew and also gave me some new questions to look at. So let me know in the comments what you think. Like, share, subscribe, and until the next time, I hope you're all well. I'll see you out in the fields real soon. Bye.